Hi, Dave. Don't
Okay.
ask me how I'm doing.
Okay.
I'm fine. Thanks for asking.
Okay. Okay.
Happy Saturday. It's Saturday when we're recording. I think
Yeah.
we'll post this tomorrow, which will be Sunday.
Good.
We're going to keep doing this. And I'm excited for today because, okay, I think the young kids would say, like, you're vibing. You got a
Oh,
lot of energy for this.
mm, I do. I really do. I mean, I actually, when you mention kids, I think, especially the one we did last time, if I think that story is captivating. I think kids could listen to it, and it's more interesting than A Night Before Christmas, in my mind.
Yeah, it is
I like,
captivating.
yeah. I mean, there's, yeah,
Well, I mean, you're already starting to do our little intro here, which I mean, I was going to say, just welcome to the wild ride of Advent.
yeah.
This is, and I'm excited for what you have to share today. A lot of it has to do with kind of where I'm at in the season of life I'm in and what's happening in my real behind the scenes life that I don't share all over the internet. Um, but we've been talking about context and how Advent isn't just like one of those epic stories, but actually all the epic stories are like Advent or like
Mhm.
the story of God. And they have all these important patterns and invitations with them. Um, so here we are, and the curtain goes up on Advent, like you said. It's been dark, but
Mhm.
it doesn't take us long to start to experience the tension of both death and life, the good and the evil, the hope and despair, and most importantly, kind of where we're landing today and where we've already talked about is this idea of these unlikely, ordinary, unremarkable people that turn into heroes that God uses. People like Frodo and Luke Skywalker. I was thinking about
Yeah, God
Narnia.
used Frodo and
No, I mean,
no, I
not
know,
in,
but that's the epic, yeah,
yeah.
pattern. Yep,
Lucy, I
yep.
was thinking about Narnia and Lucy and Edmund
Mhm.
and Mr. Tumnus. We've already talked about Mary, and today we're going to land in Joseph's story. And it's an unlikely story. Um, and why don't you just start off with us there?
Yeah, well, I love that whole thing. I just love that, and it's weird when you see these patterns like this. You know, start
Mm-hmm.
connecting. You just did it there, Narnia, because we didn't talk about that in the last episode. But Lucy, oh yeah, these epic stories always have these um, ordinary people like you and me.
Right.
The ultimate story is the story of God. We sometimes think that the story of God is like we're taking our cues from Star Wars. No, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
When things grab you the way those big stories do, if you step back, you'll realize, oh my goodness, this is really the big story.
Right.
But it's kind of veiled. Anyway, the reason I chose Joseph, as in Joseph and Mary, is because he so fits this pattern of being unremarkable
Mm-hmm.
in just about every way. I've never actually, I did a sermon on Joseph. I'm kind of redoing it here. Never heard one though. I honestly don't remember ever hearing one. We know he's got a role in the story. If you see a nativity scene anywhere, Joseph's standing there, right? He's always there.
With his
I mean,
staff,
with his staff,
sometimes.
well,
Yeah.
maybe one or two of his staff, but anyway, yeah, he's got his staff, but he really, you're not sure what his role is then to just kind of be there. Maybe somebody needed to lead the donkey that Mary rode on to Bethlehem. Uh, uh, but he did have a role. But most of the time, it looks just like he's standing there. But whatever his role was, he did it in a quiet way. Truth is, and this even kind of enhances my perception that he is um, ordinary. He does not say a word in the text. We never hear anything that Joseph says in the text. He's just kind of there. And that is in stark contrast to Mary,
Mm-hmm.
whose every word is written down when she declared what came to be known as the Magnificat. My soul doth magnify the Lord, and my spirit rejoices in God, my Savior. I'm telling you, that thing has been unpacked and preached, and it's amazing. So we've heard from Mary, and not just in the Magnificat. We've heard from Mary on several occasions, but never from Joseph, not a word. So maybe he's a strong silent type, but he always seems to be, and it was weird when I got into the text a few years ago, because I had to preach it. It was an electionary. He always just kind of seems like he's on the edge of things. He's on the edge of the nativity scene. He's just kind of leading the donkey. He's just kind of around. But the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph too. Again, and this is where you start going, okay, maybe there's something more involved with him. The angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph just like he did to Mary, but to Joseph 3 times. In Matthew 1, verse 22, 13, and Matthew 2, 19, the angel of the Lord appeared. This is significant too, that he appeared, the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a dream. I'll come back to that. And every time the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph, it says that Joseph believed what the angel said and obeyed. Even though all 3 times what the angel told him to do was hard to believe, even harder to obey. Because here's the first thing that happened. Picture Joseph, and you've heard this part of the story, but before Joseph and Mary were together as husband and wife, they had been betrothed. In our language today, they were engaged. They had promised to marry. Before they were able to marry, Mary is found with child. She's pregnant, which was, and I'm letting go of all the, whatever else we could say about that, but I promise you that was heartbreaking for Joseph. Like, that event was perceived, I promise you, as a major betrayal. Like, I thought it was just us. I thought we were together. I thought you promised. Oh, okay. And Joseph was an honorable man. I mean, he really was a good guy. This is in the story too. In Matthew 1:19, not wanting to subject Mary to public disgrace, cared about her, but he dismissed her quietly. Like, we got to break up, and but I'm gonna do it quiet. Not gonna make a stink. It's not going to be in the papers. I'm not going to embarrass you or demand my rights. So he had a plan, and it was to send her away secretly. And given the circumstances, that was a reasonable plan, especially given the culture, reasonable plan. Okay. But then the angel appeared and said, Joseph, Adam's another story. Don't be afraid to take Mary as your wife, even though people will whisper, even though there will be a scandal, and even though you don't get it. That's the biggest one. Even though you don't get it, even though you can't see it, I want you to take her. Basically, even though you don't understand it, Joseph, this is a God thing. Maybe one day you'll get it. Right now you don't. I'm just telling you, it's a God thing. This is a conceived by the Holy Spirit thing. Here's the thing about Joseph, he believed. Okay. Which doesn't mean he didn't wonder, which doesn't mean he didn't question. It doesn't mean he didn't go, it doesn't mean he didn't doubt. But here's the thing about Joseph, another little piece of his character, part of the story. He did what the angel commanded. So he believed, and then he did, which means he took Mary as his wife. That's 1. Here's 2. He did it again. In chapter 2, after the child had been conceived, baby Jesus has been born, and he's now in a manger somewhere. In verse 13, it says that the angel of the Lord appeared to Joseph again, important, in a dream, and said to Joseph, get up. That's what it says in the text. Get up, because he was sleeping. Take the child and his mother and flee to Egypt. This is weird. I remember studying this, and just that phrase, that's exactly how it reads in the text. Take the child and his mother, flee to Egypt. And I thought it was odd, just a little side note here, because it sounds somehow separate from Joseph. It's like he really is this bit player. He's kind of this guy on the edge of things. It seems insensitive to him a little bit in my mind, because it doesn't say take the child and your wife. That would have been even a little nicer, your wife,
Yeah.
Mary. It doesn't even say take the child and his mother, Mary. It says, it sounds impersonal to me, like Joseph is just an errand boy.
Hmm.
You know, get up, go, take the child, the kid.
Bring me the
go,
coffee.
bring me the coffee. Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And this is, then I thought this, so what if he's a bit player? So what if he was? And then I thought, what if I am? What if you are? What if you're just a bit player
Mm-hmm.
in the big scheme? That, hey, part of the story of God, and we're all, you know. What if really we're just bit players? Would we still believe and obey? That's an incredible question.
Mm-hmm.
If we're not the center of the story, because it's not our story, it's God's story. If it's not about us, really, at all, this runs countercultural.
Yeah.
If we're not the star of the show, leading the parade, and here's a flash in the middle of that. We're not the star of the show. And this story, we're not the center of the story. I mean, this is like really, this is a good therapy session right here. You know, I got a flash for you. You're not the center of the story. I mean, you could try to arrange your life that way, and most people do. That's why we go nuts when we're not the center of the story. But we're not the point. You are not the point. Yeah. Neither am I. I had this thing about Samson. Don't have time to get into it now, but this incredibly gifted by God with physical strength, but I would make it a metaphor of spiritual strength. And he was given that as a spiritual gift because the people of God were in bondage to the Philistines, and he was to use his strength to set the people free. Then the physical strength to me was spiritual. But he wasn't in it for the long haul because he kind of thought that gift God gave him was for him, and it never was, and he never got it. And so he used it for him. He didn't, and I don't like Samson. Let me keep going. And okay, so getting back to, if you are a bit players, Joseph, is that okay with you? Back to Joseph now. Apparently was for him, because when Joseph heard what the angel said, and keep in mind, he heard it in a dream. It says he got up. Angel said, get up. Joseph got up, and he took the child and his mother to Egypt, and there he remained. It says in verse 15, and there he remained. I mean, he even did that. I want you to remain there. And remaining feels passive. No, that's what he did. He remained. Mm-hmm. And when you're in that place where all you can do is remain, it means that all you can do is wait. So now he's in that waiting place. And what he's waiting for is a word, a sign, some indication. Now stick this into your life and mine when we're in these waiting places. Some indication that God's at work. Okay, I went to Egypt. I did what you said.
Now what?
I didn't understand it. You know, I'm not sure about even taking Mary, but yeah, now what? And so I'm looking for an indication that God's going to show up and intervene, that God has finally done what he said he would do. I'm looking for an indication that Herod is finally dead, and that the slaughter of the innocents is finally over. And I think you all know about that. And if I haven't put that in the story yet, it needs to go here because it's really important. If we're going to understand the story of Joseph, who's always on the edge of things, and maybe a bit player, I don't think he is, but we need to really understand the story of Joseph. It has to stay connected to the story of Herod. So you contrast Joseph's quiet, consistent obedience and faith. It's connected to the story of Herod and his slaughter of the innocents, in part because it's central to the story, particularly as it's kind of just laid out in the text, beginning with the angel appearing to Joseph in a dream at the end of chapter 1. because at the beginning of chapter 2, so end of chapter 1, angel appears to Joseph, get up and go. Next chapter, the Magi then appear to Herod, looking for the child who would be king, and Herod is freaked that there's a rival king. And then middle of chapter 2, so just a few verses later, so the angel appears, then Herod gets all crazy. Then the angel comes back to, again, to Joseph in a dream saying, get up and go to Egypt. And then at the end of chapter 2, just a few more verses, Herod is enraged and the slaughter of the innocents begins. And you know what I mean by the slaughter of the innocents. In order to kill the king that he thought was a threat to his baby, he decided to kill all the babies. And then in verse 18, it says, the voice was heard in Ramah, weeping and mourning, Rachel weeping for her children, refusing to be comforted because the children were no more. And all that's connected. All of that's connected. Indeed, if we don't keep them connected, Joseph's quiet, consistent belief and obedience that took Mary, then left, connected to Herod's stuff. If we don't keep him connected, we don't know Joseph's story.
Yeah.
We really don't understand his journey. We really don't understand the nature of his faith that kept obeying, or the strength of his character that was quiet and consistent. And we really don't understand what it cost him to say yes, to get up and flee. And when the angel said, take Mary as your wife, when the angel said, get up, when the angel said, flee to a land you do not know, when the angel said, remain there where you'll just have to wait. And every time he heard that stuff, we don't hear him say a word. It's significant. I'm not sure he didn't say a word, but it's significant in the text. We don't hear. He just got up and did it. He believed and obeyed. And all of that, by the way, the slaughter of the innocents and getting up and going and taking Mary as your wife when you were really wanting to nicely put her, let her just go away, all that paints a very different picture of the domesticated version we've been talking about, and the sanitized version of Christmas, where all is common, all is bright. The truth is, I mean, I love that song, and I'm, just like, don't you think we should sing Silent Night? I love Silent Night. I think we should sing it. I just think we need to know it wasn't a silent night. There was nothing about that night that was silent. Yeah, and it, man, at that level, that song does bug me. I mean, I really love that song, but you got to get above the reality of what was actually happening in humans' lives. I mean, to do that. Nadia Bolz Weber, I think you know about Nadia Bolz Weber on account. In fact, I think maybe Katie Beasley and you got me into her stuff. She's a rather unconventional Lutheran pastor. Is that a good way to describe her? Yeah. Covered with tattoos, swears like a sailor. I mean, she's incredible. In her book, Incarnational or Accidental Saints, in one of her chapters, she's dealing with Advent. And what she's doing, though, in this book, it wasn't long after, but she was recounting in her chapter on Lent the events of Christmas 2012. And Christmas 2012 was when 11 days before Christmas, a guy named Adam Lanza, whatever, remember, walked into Sandy Hook Elementary and pulled the trigger. It was the slaughter of innocents, literally the slaughter of the innocents. And suddenly, nobody was in a cozy Christmas mood. Let me just quote what she says there. Indeed, all the sentimental music still playing in stores left me agitated and wondering, when did Christmas become a Hallmark Channel, Precious Moments, Norman Rockwell delusion? I think we've lost a lot. No, I'm sorry. I think we've lost the plot, she said, because God did not enter into the world or a nostalgic silent nights of our peace on earth, sugar cookie, suspended reality version of Christmas. Because God slipped into the vulnerability of skin and entered a world just as violent and disturbing as ours. Indeed, the story of Christmas that includes the story of Herod reveals a God who has entered into the world as it actually exists, not in a Norman Rockwell painting. Not that there's anything wrong with him. Anyway.
Good job, Norman Rockwell. We like you.
Yeah. And not as the world we often wish it would be, which is actually good news, she says, still quoting her. But there's danger here as well. Because if we don't know the real story of Christmas, we can start to think that Christianity in general offers only warm sugar cookies, hot cocoa, and heavenly peace. Right?
Yeah.
So maybe soft focused photos of doves flying in front of waterfalls and inspirational verses on coffee cups aren't really helping us much to navigate a world where we witness children being slaughtered in schoolrooms, and maybe that romanticized version isn't helping us much in producing the kind of quiet and consistent obedience and faith we see in Joseph. That romantic stuff would not produce a Joseph.
No.
Which, okay, now that brings me to the second thing I see in this story, Joseph. This is where it gets really weird. If you think it was weird so far, this is like over the edge.
Okay, I'm here for it. Let's go.
Okay, here we go. It's just that his quiet and consistent obedience and faith was being lived out in the context of two battles. One battle that was going on was one that he could see. Okay, it was the one that forced him to physically go to Egypt. It was embodied in Herod. He knew about Herod killing the babies, so there was a physical thing he was seeing and reacting to and having to do things with. So this thing, it's the thing you can see in your own life. It's the conflict you're in. It's the opposition that you're experiencing.
Yeah.
So it's a physical battle. It's flesh and blood. You can see it. And maybe every morning when you wake up in the morning, you see it every day on the way to work. You fight it every day. And there's things in the physical arena when we're in some sort of physical kind of battle, if you will. There's things you have to do. Like Joseph had to take Mary. He had to get up. He had to flee and go to Egypt. But there's two battles going on at the same time in this particular story, but I think in all of our lives in a variety of ways. I actually think there always are these two battles, especially when something is being conceived by the Holy Spirit. I don't know how to unpack this whole thing, but think of a time in your life when or our church. I've experienced this a lot in the context of church or your life, your marriage. Something is brewing, something is growing. Something is being conceived in you, in us, that is of the Spirit. And when something, I promise you, here's the deal. When something is about to be born in you, in us, in a church, that is conceived by the Spirit, that is like the life of God growing, there will always be two battles. One, you will be able to see. It's physical. The opposition will have names and places. You'll know who they are. The other opposition to the life of God that's beginning to stir in the church, in the family, in your marriage, in you, is invisible, because that battle is spiritual and you can't see it. Though it's real, and though, and this is where it gets weird, I just got to appeal to everybody's, okay, have you ever experienced this? Like, there's a spiritual dimension to the opposition of anything God's doing in you, and you can't see it, but every once in a while you'll get a glimpse.
Yeah.
Right? And the glimpses come like an angel in a dream. Now I'm into Joseph, okay? That angel in a dream. In a dream, all three times it was in a dream. Here's the deal about getting a word in a dream. like, I think we try to get too technical with like, how was it actually a dream? I think the metaphor of the dream indicates that it was very real to him, but like a dream, it's a little fuzzy. You wake up
Yeah.
in the morning, you go, whoa, what was that? But the longer you go, it fades, right?
Yeah.
I'm not quite so sure about, was that the coffee or the pizza? But it was that. So it's real in the moment, but that feeling can quickly fade. So when you're in one of those things and you feel like something's starting, not necessarily in a dream, but you got one of those things where you feel like, oh my goodness, I think I'm hearing from God, and I got some revelation around what this is really about, but you're not sure. Who do you talk to? I mean, other than Vicki Degner, I mean, I don't know who you, right? Honestly, I think of her stuff like this.
I mean, I call you, or
you can, yeah. I'll tell you to call Vicki. But honestly, but who do you call for clarification that you're not imagining this, that what you heard was real? How do you know? How do you know that the second battle, which is spiritual, really is affecting the first? Because I see some conflict here, and that's just part of life. Don't be thinking every time you're in a conflict, it must be the devil. No, you're just stupid. you know that or yeah
it's just life. It's just part of
yeah,
being a human.
don't need the devil. Don't need the devil. You're just an idiot. So anyway, but every once in a while you'll be part of, particularly if there's something moving where the Spirit of God is up to something, and something is beginning to grow that is born of Him. There will be opposition, and it'll start to manifest sometimes in the physical, in what you can see. And every once in a while, I think you get a glimpse. And we get a glimpse of what's actually going on with Joseph and Mary when he had to get up and go to Egypt and all that. We get a glimpse of, okay, that's the physical thing. Physically, there was the slaughter of the innocents. That's very real. That's what he's waking up to every day. Physically, I go to Egypt. Well, what was going on in the spirit realm, he couldn't see that, but we get a glimpse of it actually out of the book of Revelation, which is amazing. And it's actually my favorite Christmas story, especially when I'm trying to kind of dismantle our romantic views of Christmas. I think you've heard me talk about the Christmas Revelation style.
Yeah.
And the whole idea that Christmas is not captured in a Thomas Kincaid painting. Says this in chapter 12 of Revelation 1. John is out in the island of Patmos, and he sees into the realm of the Spirit and says this: I saw a great sign that appeared in heaven. And what I saw was a woman clothed with the sun and the moon, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. 12 stars were the 12 tribes of Judah. So they were the 12, so that's Israel. And she was with child, and she cried out in labor and pain to give birth. Back up right here, the book of Revelation, I think everybody knows, is just this, it's apocalyptic literature, which literally means weird. That's what the word means. Actually, apocalyptic means to unveil. Apocalyptic does not mean end of times. It means to unveil, and what could be unveiled are the end of times. Yeah. But what the revelation really was the revelation of Christ. That was the revelation, the apocalypse, the revealing of the Christ. And that's the language here. So it gets very obscure at times in the symbolic language, and people are always, trying to make weird conclusions. But the symbolism here is pretty clear, because here, the male child that's about to be born to a woman who would rise to rule and redeem and restore the nations is Christ. Okay, and the woman giving birth, in the largest sense of the metaphor, is actually Israel with the 12 stars, because the Messiah is going to come from Israel, as it were, right? Mm-hmm. Israel. But in more real time, like as it's physically being acted out on earth, it's Mary, who is the woman who is with child about to give birth. And then in verse 2, it says, there was another sign in heaven. And then he sees a great dragon. And the gray dragon is Satan. It's not a big stretch. Standing, now this is where it gets weird. I mean, this is no longer Silent Night. And here's the woman about to give birth, and a great dragon standing right before the woman about to give birth, so that when she gives birth, the dragon pounces literally to devour the child. That's what the text. Yeah. Anyway, how'd you like that one, kids? That was a good story. Uncle Dave is reading a story. And then the baby's born, verse 5, and then the dragon pounces. Boom, and he misses. Okay. But in his attempt, whoa, slaughter of the innocents. Holy God, lots of damage. I mean, it's an unbelievable story. By the way, the dragon pounces again at on Good Friday, and they nailed him to a tree, and he missed again. It's a big story. But none of that stuff about the dragon pouncing and missing. Joseph couldn't see any of that. All he saw was Herod. See that? He didn't know what was behind Herod, because this was what was behind Herod. This was demonically energized. You don't always get to see that. Yeah. You see Herod, and he could see the slaughter of the innocents, the killing of many in hopes to kill the one. And then in verse 6, he misses. That is the dragon. And the woman flees Egypt, says to the wilderness is what it says, where she had a place prepared for her by God. Okay. She had a place prepared for her by God. And when she showed up, she says, this looks like a place prepared for me by God. No, it didn't, right? No, it looked like Egypt to her. It was prepared for her by God. I'm just saying, this is the way it is for us. We don't walk in, this is a place prepared. No, it's just, you're living in a trailer.
Yeah.
Anyway, right? Okay. Yeah. That's the point. She was in Egypt. That's where she went. She was safe. And she didn't know all of what was going on. But there was more going on. And often there is more going on, more than she could see. Verse 7, back to Revelation, because she shows up in Egypt, this place prepared for her by God. And back to the Revelation, in the spirit realm, while she was safe in Egypt, there was a war going on in heaven. Verse 7 of Revelation 12. Michael and his angels waging a war with the dragon, none of which Joseph could see, Mary could see, at least not with physical eyes. And quite frankly, I think in terms of spiritual warfare, if we could see what was going on in the realm of spirit, we would cower in a corner, and we wouldn't come out. I've been in conversations with staff and elders at certain times when, let's say, we're going through a conflict of some sort, and sometimes it's just normal human beings, and you deal with it. But every once in a while, I have this thing that every once in a while, Satan, the enemy, tips his hand. Like, I don't know how to describe it any other way, but then when you're around people who discern, we know what this is now. It's almost like he goes too far. You go, wait. This is not just stupid people. We always have stupid people. This is on top of that.
Yeah.
And I'm among the stupid people who cause problems. But all of a sudden you realize something more is, then you got a glimpse. And like an angel in a dream. And it revealed enough, this angel in a dream, even though it was still fuzzy, just like the words from God are to us, it revealed enough to him for him to know it was, there was more going on than what he could see. And that's at least part of why he did what the angel commanded. And he got up and he fled, and he remained where all he could do was wait in Egypt, because sometimes that's all we can do. Let me wrap it up with this. A couple of observations and an exhortation. Observation number 1 is that anytime and every time anything, be it in your life or marriage, your family, our church, is about to be born, it's about to come to life spiritually. And I'm not talking about a good idea. I'm not talking about a next cool program. I'm talking about something that is being conceived by the Holy Spirit among us. It will be opposed. Guarantee it. It will. Anything born of the Spirit. I just a little tiny illustration. I remember years ago we started this training center of spiritual formation, and one of the metaphors that as a team we constantly had along with the elders was we're pregnant with something here. Something's being born. Something's being born. And in 38 years, I don't know of anything that was more opposed than that, more effective than that, but also like, and there were more than one, holy cow. And angels appeared to us in dreams saying, yeah, there's more going on here than, because something of life was about to be born. And there were things happening that were, whoa, they're going to kill this thing.
Yeah.
Almost dead. Anyway, it's just good. It's not fairy tale stuff to me. And that's just one little story. Because here's the deal. The reason the life of God will be opposed in big and small ways is that somewhere something is going to be threatened by it. There's always a Herod, and maybe it's even just the enemy who uses Herod. Okay.
Right.
And their desire will be to snuff out that life. Sometimes it's subtle. I could go off on this one. I think in church it never come. When something's being opposed in church, there aren't any Herods. You're not going to kill a bunch of babies. You'd get in trouble for that.
Yeah.
But in real nice and passive aggressive ways, the undermining of things. It's just fascinating how Nehemiah, remember building the wall?
Yep.
Something was being born there that needed to be done, and Sanballat and Tobiah, whoa, you're not doing the wall right. I don't like how you're building that wall. Do you really know what you're doing? I don't think that wall's safe. Come down and talk to us. No, I'm not gonna listen to you. Anyway, observation number 2. If what's about to be born in you and me and us really is something that God has conceived, and again, not just a good idea, the opposition will be played out on 2 levels. One will be, it'll come from 2 directions. One, we can see. It'll be physical. There will be people we need to talk to. There will be sin we need to confront. There will be things we need to apologize for. There will be things we need to do to deal with this opposition. And again, the thing that you might see that's physically resisting what God is doing in the church, marriage, whatever, in your own heart, you might see it every day. You'll be aware of it, like Herod was to Joseph. Which means that part of our response, even when we're in spiritual warfare and the enemy is really on the move, because there is a physical dimension to it, it's being played out physically. Even when it is spiritual warfare, there are certain things we have to physically do.
Right.
Like Joseph, who did what the angel commanded, who took Mary as his wife, who got up and fled and went to Egypt and then remained. That's what he did. But second battle, the second kind of opposition is that spiritual when you can't see it. But it's just as real. And in some ways it's more intense, and maybe it's more intense because you can't see it. I don't know. I don't, because it isn't physical, it's spiritual. And when you're in the middle of that, I'm just telling you, and I just know this is true. This is weird. I'm talking like I really do know this. I mean, I've been around long enough this is when I get to play that card authentically. Yeah. Every once in a while you get a glimpse. You do. And you can count on anybody listen. If it's every once in a while, you'll get a glimpse. But they often come like an angel in a dream.
Yeah.
It's going to be a little fuzzy. That feels real in the moment, but then it starts to fade. So how do you know? How do you trust that, which leads to the exhortation. We need to pay real close attention to both levels of opposition, that our lives are being played out on a level that is, I can see, but it's also being played out on a level that I can't see. And we need to be aware of and in tune with both. And then we need to be aware, and this is important, that we can't fight the spiritual fight. We can't fight the spiritual unseen part of the battle as if it were physical. Paul says the weapons of our warfare spiritually are not of the flesh. They're mighty through God for the bringing down strongholds, but they're not of the flesh. Now, little tip here: not everybody gets that there really is a spiritual battle and that you can't use physical tactics to win it. So go to people who do.
Yeah.
Call Vicki Degner. The Vicki Degners of the world.
Vicki's gonna hate you after this. She can get
No,
so many
she's
phone calls.
No, she owes me money from this.
Oh,
The other thing is,
Yeah.
even when it is a spiritual battle, there are physical ways it's going to play out, which means there are things we physically have to do. We can get so like, oh, it's a spiritual battle, so let's just pray and not do anything. No. You might have to confront some things.
Mhm.
You might have to say some things. You might have to do some things. Okay. But the part of the battle you can't see requires, honestly, I mean, I can feel this. It requires, while there are things we have to do, the spiritual part of this requires a different strategy. It requires different weapons. If we try to fight a spiritual battle that we can't see by means of our physical capacities, by physical capacity, I mean by how smart we are. I can figure this out. I can talk you. I can control this, like our physical strength or our strategy or our intellect. On the physical level, we might win, but if you're in a spiritual battle, none of that stuff's you'll lose. You'll lose. In fact, picture a soldier who's the only way he knows to fight is swing a sword. But if you're in a spiritual battle, you can't see what you're swinging at. So he's swinging the sword and he's not swinging anything. I promise you're not going to hit anything.
Right.
Well, you might hit something physically and you'll do a lot of damage. Because when I'm in a spiritual battle, my instinct, I'm an 8 on the Enneagram. So my instinct about everything in conflict is get big, right? Get big.
Yep.
And I'm good at the physical level. But truthfully, if you're living out this Herod story and you're getting in tune with the spiritual dimension of this story, the last thing you need to do is get big. What you need to do is get small.
Yeah.
Right now. You need to get little. You need to get quiet. Don't give in to fear, and you need to pray, because this battle belongs to God.
Yeah.
Yep. And what I see in Joseph is a capacity for both those things. This guy on the edges who, as far as we know, never said a word, because in the battle that he couldn't see, every once in a while, when he was quiet, he was asleep. It came in a dream. The angel of the Lord would appear in a dream and he'd get a glimpse. And when he got a glimpse, this is all he needed. It was enough. I love this guy. Because now I know what to do, and he did it. I got up, he fled, then he remained, and he waited. Final question, how do you do that? How do you become that kind of person? What kind of things would you need to know and believe to be the kind of person, to become the kind of person who quietly and consistently believed and obeyed, even when you're not the star of the show, even when you're not the center of the story, even though you don't fully get it, what God seems to be doing, how Mary got pregnant, didn't ever quite get that. Even though it might cost you and you'll have to change your plans and go to Egypt or something. Well, I think you'd need to know, or at least believe, one, that there really are two things going on. I think to navigate this, you'd have to know there's two battles, and you have to fight them different. So, like, I even think part of equipping the saints for the work of ministry isn't just memorizing verses. It would be teaching people, you guys, navigating this life, we're living it on two different levels. How do you do that? Can you discern the difference? Do you know the different weapons for each? So sometimes you do get big, but sometimes you need to get really little and listen and pray. And then I think you need to really believe, and this is the zinger to me, I think to enter this and navigate it well and be a Joseph, you need to believe that being faithful matters more than being famous or successful or known. He had a bit part. He had more than the bit part, but it was never his desire to have anything more than that. You have to know it's more important to be faithful than famous or no. And that every time you say yes to God in big or small ways, you might not understand it. That might cost you a lot, but now you're in the story. And now you have a role to play in restoring shalom in some big or small way. And if Joseph was here, I have this imaginary conversation with him. I go, say Joseph. So after all of that, taking Mary, getting up, going, remaining, waiting, what do you do now? I imagine him looking at me like I'm a stupid person and saying, well, I think I'm gonna quietly and consistently believe and obey. That's what I do. And that's the story of Joseph. Merry Christmas, ho, ho, ho.
I mean, it's definitely not the domesticated Sunday school cartoon version of what we know.
No.
And for 2020, I mean, I know that's not the first time you've done that sermon, and we talked about the context of when you did do that, but I think even in 2020, like, it's the stories like that are so refreshing, and it just cuts right through all the garbage of what the world is trying to tell us about what the context the world wants to give us, and what the whole reason we started all this, what the truth really is when everything else falls away. What are the things we can hold on to? What remains?
The phrase that comes to mind when you say that is all the fun little stories of Christmas and ho, 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 and all that romantic stuff. It isn't evil at all. But that's the story that isn't real.
Yes.
And I mean, this is a good job. I mean, the enemy's done a good job here because it's flipped for most people. Mm-hmm. I mean, the Christmas story, the baby in the barn. I mean, I don't know how you could hear the authentic Christmas story without being terrified and then end up in tears. Mm-hmm. But yeah, but because that's the real story.
Yeah.
And so the ho 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 and all that. I just love that with the grandkids. We're gonna go crazy and all that. Yeah. But it's a bigger story than this. This is a fun one.
There was a war going on, and God came down.
Yeah, I love that. I love that phrase. I remember while there was on earth peace, goodwill to men, in heaven a war going on in heaven. But when you actually start putting the whole story together, there was a war going on earth too. I mean, it wasn't just yeah, it wasn't any peace on earth.
Yeah.
So.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep. This is so weird. My brain just is continually going. We have to stop now.
I know.
But
I
could go
mean,
off
I
to
was
another thing.
taking notes, and so. All
Well,
right.
this is why maybe when we start this class, these are the places where we'll be able to open it up and talk to everybody. And so, what weird things came into your brain?
Oh, oh, we'll have to stop recording, and I'll tell you all the weird things that I'm thinking about.
Okay, good.
Hey,
Good.
you can tell us all the weird things that you're thinking about. I mean, maybe not super weird, like internet appropriate. Let us know what this brought up for you and the things in your real life, or maybe situations that have happened. That's part of where my head went. It was like, oh, remember this time and that time and that time, where this really is true, and where God's story is playing out in your past, present, and maybe even in your future. What are the things that you're smelling, like Joseph smelled, like Joseph heard?
You
Or
know,
maybe
and
something
what
that
else?
you need to remember that God did tell you and you weren't sure about it, and this helps you feel sure.
Yep. I love that. Particularly if you're a Joseph right now,
Yeah.
in one of those, I don't know, but you quietly, consistently believe and obey.
Yep.
And it's worth it. That's
Bye,
most
everyone.
of us. Okay.
Don't fall over.
Go, get out of here.